Aloha, I'm Ed Case, and as we tape this, we're taping it from Richardson's, which is where I was born and raised, right here in Hilo. I have, of course, had the great privilege of representing the Big Island and Hawaii in the United States Congress from 2002 to 2007, and previously representing Hawaii in the state legislature from 1994 to 2002. I've had a very, very full life, very full career in both the private and the public sectors, and of course, I'm asking to be your next United States Senator. You know, sometimes we get so wrapped up in all of the issues in Washington and the agendas and what we're doing in our campaigns that we kind of forget who the person is behind all of that. And I've had a very full public life, but also I have my roots, just like everybody else does. And I think roots are part of who a person is, obviously. How I was born, how I was raised, where I come from makes a difference in who I am. And this is who I am because this is where I grew up. I wanted to just spend a little bit of time in this particular show to tell you about myself and tell you a little bit about who I am and where I came from. And this is a good place to do it from. Let me start a couple of generations back because that's where my story in Hawaii starts. My great-grandparents moved to Hawaii from Kansas in the 1800s. They got to Honolulu in 1896 and they spent a couple of years in Honolulu, and then from Honolulu they went to Maui. They moved to Maui in 1902 and lived there for a couple of decades throughout their entire lives. My great-grandfather was a judge on Maui, and they both contributed very much to the community there. So when we're over on Maui, people still remember Judge Case and his wife, and of course the work that they did there on Maui. My grandfather grew up on Maui and then went away to college and to the First World War and came home. And when he got home, he decided he wanted to raise his children on the neighbor islands, just as my great-grandparents had done. He moved to Kauai. He got to Kauai in about 1918, and he spent the entire rest of his life on Kauai working at the Grove Farm, one of the sugar plantations on Kauai. And he and his grandmother raised my father and their other children right there in Lihui. And so my father, Jim Case, who just celebrated his 92nd birthday, I was born and raised on the neighbor islands as well, and had that kind of upbringing that comes from living in a more rural part of our Hawaii. My father went away, as did his father, to college and came back and after the Second World War, and he also spent a couple of years in Honolulu. He had gone to law school. He had married my mother, who was originally from Missouri. And they came back to Hawaii in the late 1940s, and they spent a couple of years on Oahu. And then my father, like his father before him, decided that really he wanted to live on the neighbor islands and raise his family on the neighbor islands. And there was an opening with a small firm right here in Hilo, a firm called Carl Smith & Carl Smith, which actually was the oldest and still is the oldest law firm in all of Hawaii. It was put together in about the 1860s or the 1870s. And it had been operating for some time right here in Hilo, but it was only a Hilo firm at the time. And they brought him on. He was the third lawyer in the firm, and he came to Hilo in 1951. And he started working as a very junior associate for the Carl Smith firm. And he and my mother first lived at 4 Miles. That was the very first place that they lived when they were right here in Hilo. And I was born in 1952 right here in Hilo when they were living at 4 Miles. I was born on the old Hilo Hospital, the old Hilo Hospital up by Rainbow Falls. I think it's a prosecutor's office now. And one time I went to visit the prosecutor over there, and I went into the prosecutor's office and I said, I think this was where I was born. So the building has been around, been through a couple of incarnations since there. So I grew up right there at 4 Miles. I learned to swim right at 4 Miles, started going out into the outdoors with my parents all of the time. They lived in town for a couple of years after that. I don't remember it, I was too young. But then when I was about 3 or 4 years old, they moved here to Richardson's. And we lived right across the street, right over there. I can see my old property from here. The house isn't there anymore. It burned down many years ago and it was never rebuilt. But this is where I grew up, and I lived really the beginning of my life. And if I ask myself what really forms Ed Case, it's the life that I had right here. Of course, you can see, and you all know if you know where we are, that it's just the outdoors. It's a beautiful ocean. We spent all of our time outdoors. That's what it was like in those days. You know, in those days we didn't have any cable TV. We hardly even had TV because Mauna Kea in the background blocked all of the airwaves from Honolulu. And you know, my parents had an interesting philosophy. They didn't have TV in our house. They believed that TV was a little distracting to an upbringing, and so when I grew up with my friends and my siblings right here at the end of the road in Keaukaha, it was very much about going out and making up your own things to do. You know, the things that are here today, like organized soccer, that wasn't really the case. We did everything on our own. We went outside all of the time. We went in the ocean behind us. We learned to surf right here, and we learned to swim. And you know, I wish we had the kayaks that they have out there on the water right now, because we would have done a lot of that too. But for us, every day was getting outside. Every day was going and finding your friends and going out down the road, getting in the water, getting outside to play. You know, one of the things we used to do, I remember, was on each Saturday morning we'd get on our bikes and we'd take our bikes down into Hilo town, and the Mamo Theater was still going in those days. They had a movie and a hot dog for maybe 25 cents, something like that, on a Saturday morning. But it was almost all outdoors in those days. My parents really believed in exposing us to everything about the island of Hawaii and about Hawaii in general. So we would take family trips all the time. During the summers, we would routinely go and camp in South Kona, where I learned to spearfish. That's where I learned really many of the ocean activities that I still have, and that's where I picked up my passion for the outdoors and the ocean. Whenever the volcano erupted, we'd go up to the volcano. That was a great excuse to cut out of school and just pile the family in the station wagon and hit the volcano. So I remember some of those great eruptions when you could get right up close and just sit there and watch Mother Nature and Pele in action. Another thing that I remember very much about living down here was that, of course, we're right by the ocean right now, and in those days we didn't have really the sophistication in the tsunami warning system that we have today. Today we can make some informed judgments about whether an earthquake somewhere will lead to a tsunami or not. In those days there was no warning system, and so anytime there was an earthquake really anywhere in the Pacific Basin, we'd have to get out of here. For the most part those were kind of false alarms. But we would pack up and head for high ground, spend the night at our friend's house. But I definitely remember the one day in 1960 when it wasn't any false alarm, and we packed up and headed for high ground at 1 o'clock in the morning. Of course, a tsunami came in and wiped out a good portion of Hilo, and I remember that devastation. I was going to school at the time at the old Keaukaha High School, elementary school, I'm sorry, down by Waimea Peninsula, and our school was definitely affected by that, and some teachers actually lost. But I think, you know, overall, just kind of reflecting on the upbringing that I had right here at Richardson's, right here in Keaukaha, right here in Hilo. It was a wonderful upbringing from a self-sufficiency point of view, from a independence point of view, from a focus on the outdoors, always a point of view, and it was I couldn't have asked for a better place to grow up than right here at the end of the road in Keaukaha. I wanted also to introduce you to my wife and partner Audrey, who's been with me every step of the way. Our 4 children are off doing something else right now. They're in their 20s and they're all well off into their lives. Audrey's still with me on the campaign trail, so I just wanted to ask her to tell you a little bit about herself, and so you can get to know her too.
Well, I'm Sansei, 3rd generation, Hawaii born. My father's family came to Oahu, and my mother's side actually settled first in Maui, Punene, and then after a few years in Kona. Grew coffee and worked plantations actually. My dad was an Episcopal minister, and when he came back from seminary, he first actually, I think the first church that he helped at was in Kona, but his first church that he actually ministered to a full congregation was here in Hilo at Holy Apostles, where my oldest brother was born at Hilo Hospital, the old Hilo Hospital, 10 years before you.
Wait, I never knew that. All of these years, I never knew your oldest brother was born in Hilo Hospital.
You did, I mentioned it, you just weren't listening. Anyway, he was born there, but the rest of us were born on Oahu. My mother was a nurse, an RN, and she when she came back from nursing school, she did practice at, she was a nurse at Kona Hospital, where my cousin's daughter is actually a nurse right now. So we have a long history in Kona. My family's still there. The whole Hirata side is still there. Many of the old timers would know my Uncle Peter, who was the principal at Holualoa, I think,
yeah.
on that side. But yeah.
And so where did we meet? You might as well just tell everybody that right.
Well, my dad was one of the few Japanese-speaking Episcopal ministers, so we traveled a little bit. We were first here and then Oahu, and we spent a little time in San Francisco. And when I was about 11, he was older. I was born, I was the last in line. I was born a little late in his life. So by the time he was looking at the end of his career, he decided he wanted to come home, and he got the position at St. James Episcopal Church in Kamuela, which everybody from the Big Island knows is right across from the baseball field, right in Kamuela. And that's where we met, because...
well, we didn't meet at the baseball field.
No, we didn't meet at the baseball field. We met in 7th grade. Yeah.
At Hawaii Prep.
Yeah. Never did I realize it would be life-changing, but yeah.
Okay, now what do you want to tell everybody about your first impressions of me? Wait a minute, cancel that question. I don't think we really want to ask that question.
Well, we were both very shy, so it was hard. We were 11, you know. What can I say?
What do you remember about growing up on the Big Island? I think you've told me sometimes about cruising around with your parents as well.
Well, same, you know, we had the same thing. In Kamuela, there was no TV. Maybe on a good, clear night, you could get Kpoi, I think, you know. Barely you could get that, and so we just spent time reading a lot. I think my dad and I played chess a lot, and just did a lot of outdoors things. We just usually hiked around the Buster Brown Mountains, yeah, the hills, the 3 hills back at Kamuela, and go swimming in the reservoir, which I don't know if I should say, but we did.
That's all right. Everybody still does that
still
stuff. Probably we probably shouldn't talk about it.
Yeah, yeah, we did that. And then, of course, you know, Kamuela in those days was very rural, and it was great. My dad would wake me up in the morning, and early in the morning when the Paniolos were, you know, riding the herd through the middle of town. That's very bright in my memory still.
One of the jokes that we always make out there on the campaign trail is, of course, there's kind of this unwritten competition between West Hawaii and East Hawaii. And of course, I was born and raised right here in Hilo, and Audrey's family is a Kona family. So we always joke that if we can get this worked out as well as we have, this island can do it too. Well, as you can see, we're now at Keaukaha School, where I graduated from, right here on the Hawaiian homelands. You know, as I look back on my Big Island upbringing, the 18 years I spent together with the roosters and the chickens on the Big Island, as I look back on what really formed me as a person during this 18 years, I have to look at the education that I had. You know, I've already talked about kind of that education at Keaukaha and Richardson's, and being outside all the time and being self-sufficient and making your own entertainment. But the education that I had in the schools that I attended right here on the Big Island all the way through my senior year really made a huge difference on me, both inside the classroom and outside the classroom. I basically went to 3 schools during my time growing up on the Big Island. The first, of course, was Waimea Elementary School. The second was Keaukaha, where I graduated from, and the third was Hawaii Preparatory Academy in Waimea. Waimea, where I went for a number of years of elementary school, was the old Waimea School. It no longer exists. It was down on the Waimea Peninsula, where the golf course is now, and there was both the elementary and the intermediate school there. And that was a thriving community in those days. Around the school were stores and residences. The Honganji was there, and I went there for many years. And the thing that strikes me the most looking back at Waimea and Keaukaha at the time was the incredible ethnic diversity, cultural diversity that were at those schools. You know, what's funny is when I think back on it, I don't think that way. My parents never said to me, wow, you're going to this school that has all this incredible ethnic diversity. They never, I don't recall that being part of the way that I grew up at all. I don't recall really considering people by what ethnicity they were or where they came from or their income level or anything like that. We all just went to school together and we all played together and we all were educated together. Yes, now that I look back on it, I can see that there were some ethnic divisions, and as a routinely minority haole in those schools, certainly I felt a little bit of the sting every once in a while, as did frankly many others throughout Hawaii. That's not unusual for going to school in Hawaii and for growing up in Hawaii. But what I really remember more than anything else is the lessons in diversity that I took with me through the rest of my life. Keaukaha at the time was predominantly Japanese, a large Filipino American, Chinese, Hawaiian, and probably about 2% haole. So I was pretty routinely the only haole in my class. My friends, though, were all over that ethnic range, whether we were playing baseball or playing at the beach or hanging out wherever we were. And there were little vignettes along the way. I remember that, come Boys' Day, we would celebrate Boys' Day and Girls' Day for our Japanese heritage. Come the great holidays from the Filipino American community, we would celebrate those things. And again, for me, it wasn't a matter of, oh, okay, this is this day, let's do this. It was just the way that we lived growing up, moving from one ethnicity to the other. And it wasn't just in the classroom, because for many of these folks, I went to their homes, they came to mine. We all played together, and as I went out there in the community, experienced these different cultures and perhaps incorporated them into myself a little bit without really realizing that it was happening. Some of them were pretty funny. I remember that one friend of mine in those days was a Filipino American. He lived in the public housing that no longer exists by the old airport. And he had he was clearly somebody that was not growing up, with significant income. I'm sure they were on some kind of an assistance, but they had a rich family life. They were so open and welcoming to me. And I remember one time his dad said, "Okay, we're going to go somewhere today. Now, you promised me you won't tell your parents where we're going to go." And I said, "Oh, I promise." And so we went way up in the mountains behind Hilo, somewhere up in the sticks, and of course there was a good chicken fight going on. So that was my introduction to that part of the culture, and I never did tell my parents. So when they're watching this show, this is the first time they know that's what I was doing with that family. Another family, many of my friends were Native Hawaiian, and sometimes the lessons were a little hard to understand, because I remember that when I was growing up, one of my very, very closest friends was a Native Hawaiian. Actually, he's still in Hilo here. He's an architect in Hilo here, and we got to the end of elementary school, and I asked him where he was going to school, and he said, "Well, I'm going to go to Kamehameha." And I went, "Well, that's where I want to go." So I went home that night and I said to my parents, "I've decided what I want to do after elementary school." And they said, "What's that?" I said, "I'd like to go board at Kamehameha." And they said, "Well, you can't go to Kamehameha." And I said, "Why not?" And they said, "Well, you're not Hawaiian." And I didn't know what to make of that at the time. Today I'm fine with it, but those are just kind of the things that you grow up with. Here at Keaukaha, I was the only haole in the class, and this was 95% Native Hawaiian. Of course, we're in the Hawaiian homesteads. And that was really a time when the Native Hawaiian culture was really being subdued among Native Hawaiians. They weren't being encouraged to come forward and relish that culture. It was more a time when, yeah, you were Native Hawaiian, and we would teach the Hawaiian language and the Hawaiian culture, but not live it. And of course, here at Keaukaha today, not only with the school itself, but with the immersion school next door, they're living this again, and I support that. And I believe that came out of the years that I spent right here at Keaukaha, not so much being taught about the culture and what it meant to be Native Hawaiian, but understanding it from living it with people that were actually living it in the community around this school. Hawaii Prep was a different education, of course. A private education versus a public education, although I don't remember there being any real, fundamental difference in terms of the quality of the education I was getting. The community was much different. Waimea in the 60s, when Audrey and I went to HPA, was not Waimea of today. It was ranch. It was very, very few people. The Mauna Kea Hotel was just started. There was no road along the Kona coast. That was wilderness. And that community was even more removed from civilization, if I can put it that way, than Hilo. Of course, we had our own civilization and relished it. But I think that at HPA in the 60s, as we went there, I was one of only 16 people in my 7th grade class. Very small community. The trees that were growing up around HPA today were planted by us. That was just like going to school on the side of a hill with the wind sweeping over it, the makani, as they call it, the kamakani. That's where Hawaii's HPA's nickname comes from. And that was a pure exercise in self-sufficiency and independence. And you know, although there was some TV here in Hilo, there was no TV in Waimea. While there was, you know, access to things in Hilo, like, you know, movies and the rest of it, there was hardly any of that at HPA. And I think that those years that I spent as a boarder at HPA molded me in a way that, again, I didn't appreciate until later on. The ability to act independently, to think independently, to sit back and try to view the world in a perspective that will allow you to make good decisions. And I think also, as did happen to me right here in Hilo growing up, a real appreciation of the environment, of the outdoors, really of the essence of Hawaii. Because when I look at my education, that really was about the essence of Hawaii, the cultures of Hawaii, the multi-ethnic culture of Hawaii, the communities of Hawaii, the spirituality of Hawaii, if I can put it that way. These are all things that came to me in my education growing up. Well, in this very brief time with you, I've tried to give you some sense of not just Ed Case, the politician, not just Ed Case, your former congressman, not just Ed Case, the person that wants to be your United States Senator, and really the things that I believe we need to do for our country, but more who I am as a person, what drives me, where did I come from, and why do I believe some of the things that I believe, and why do I care about some of the things I care about. And as I look back on my childhood now, I see a couple of things. And Audrey and I have had the benefit of having pretty much the same kind of upbringing, perhaps from a different place, but we also both had the same kinds of upbringing, the same kinds of roots. Right here in Hawaii, of course, overall, we're generations deep. Right here on the Big Island, a couple of generations deep as well. Her roots in West Hawaii and mine in East Hawaii. We've had that same upbringing in terms of independence, of self-sufficiency, of focusing on the outdoors, of enjoying activities that are outside and around our communities. We've had the benefit of great families that have brought us into communities and exposed us to things that really many other people have never been able to experience. And I think that we have also, of course, in the raising of our children, tried to pass those values along to them as well. Sometimes people on the mainland ask me, well, what was my upbringing really like? And I say, you know, in many ways, being born and raised in Hilo was like being born and raised in small-town America, but Hawaii. Small-town America because the sense of community was strong, the sense of ohana, of course, as we call it here, the sense of really taking care of each other, of being part of a larger goal, a larger community, but also being a contributing part of that community. My parents contributed to this community throughout their upbringing, in time in Hilo in so many different ways, from helping children with disabilities to helping people in need and throughout the communities. And I remember they passed that down to us. And you know, all of these things are true of small town America, whether you're in California or Idaho or anywhere else. Of course, what makes this different is it was Hawaii, and it was neighbor island Hawaii, and it was Hilo. And as I've tried to share with you, that was partly about being outdoors all of the time, experiencing and growing up in the rich environment that we have. But it was partly about true multiculturalism, a multi-ethnic life that I really didn't even think about when I was growing up. But the more I grow older, the more I reflect that it was so unusual, the kind of life that I grew up with, and the values that they really brought into me in terms of understanding different people, of tolerating differences, of being all one community, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of income level, regardless of anything else. So when I talk really about trying to grow our economy and preserve tourism on this island and create ecotourism and ag tourism and help the agricultural industry, I think that in part relates to my upbringing here. When I talk about trying to preserve a Native Hawaiian, the Native Hawaiian culture and the Native Hawaiian community, that arises from my upbringing right here in Hilo, especially in Keaukaha school. When I talk about preserving our environment, for example, trying to protect our nature, our natural heritage, trying to keep invasive species out of Hawaii, that's because of the way I grew up here. And I look back on all of that, and I can see now, later on in my life, that in so many different ways that I didn't really appreciate at the time, that beginning 18 years of my life, the 12 years right here in Hilo and the 6 years in Waimea, really formed me as a person and really drive me to this day, not only in how I want government to respond to all of us, but also what I want and believe government needs to do. So thanks for sharing a little bit of time with me and Audrey today. We welcome your questions. There's more at edcase.com. I look forward to talking to you along the trail, but again, mahalo from where I was born and raised, right here at Richardson's. Aloha.